this ain't no joke, 'cause look at this, guys, it's a rare whiteboard video. So here today, we're gonna get into how many stocks a person should hold, in my personal opinion, on this subject. As somebody that's been in the stock market for a long, long time, I wanna share my perspective. And I get this question all the time, where folks are like, well, I have this amount of money, well, I have this much experience, things like that. We're gonna get into all that in this video, and I'm gonna share my perspective on how many stocks I hold nowadays versus 10 years ago versus 5 years ago, and those sorts of things. So this is just gonna be a valued-packed video to this guy. I hope you guys really enjoy this. All I ask in return literally is for you to smash that like button for the YouTube algorithm. I appreciate all you guys for being here. Hope you appreciate me doing a straight teaching video like we're doing here today, guys. And without further ado, let's get into this. By the way, I have something pretty exciting to announce at the end of this video here today, okay? So if you're wondering like how many stocks a person should hold, there's three core questions in my opinion you gotta ask yourself, okay? The first question is, how much money are we talking about? This is a very important component, right? Somebody that has $5,000 is going to invest very differently than somebody that has $5 million, right? And so this is a very important factor. We cannot just like disregard this and act like this is not important. How much money an individual has is absolutely extremely important, okay? So you got to ask yourself this, right? I got to ask yourself, how much do you know? Do you actually, a lot of folks want to get in the stock market. They want to get started, right? And so they set up a brokerage account. They start making some moves out there and things like that. But do individuals really know? Like, do you know how to actually like judge an income statement? Do you actually know how to judge a balance sheet? Do you actually know how to value a stock? Do you know how to value a stock? Do you know how to value a growth stock? Because valuing these stocks can be very differently, right? And so you got to ask yourself, like, how much do you know? Where are you at in this game? That's another very important thing. And the third question, that is a key question out of these three for trying to figure out how many stocks you should hold, is how much time do you have to invest, right? Like, how much time do you have to do research on stocks? Somebody might have 2 hours a week to dedicate towards stock market research, looking into stocks, things like that. Somebody else might have 50 hours a week that they can dedicate toward looking into stocks and research and those sorts of things. Those two individuals are going to invest differently. They're going to hold a different amount of stocks, okay? So those are three core components that you got to think about. Now here on this little, line here, right? We have essentially, dramatic sides, right? Down here, you got somebody just investing in an index fund, meaning they've just put all their money into the S&P 500. That money is invested around the S&P 500, so it can be in 500 different stocks, right? And some folks do that honestly don't have any time, right? Or maybe they do have the time, they just don't want to put in the research time. And some folks don't want to do that. Respect, okay? Now, the 99% of you guys watching this video, you guys want to put in that time, or you're already putting in that time. So this isn't really going to be you, right? However, if let's say I wasn't allowed to do research on stocks for the rest of my life, yeah, no doubt I would just be in an S&P 500 index fund, right? Or if I didn't feel like putting in the work anymore to research in companies, I'd be there, right? Down here, you have the polar opposite, which would be putting every single dollar and every single dime you have into one stock, right? And so we have these kind of different, like, polar opposites where you're all in one stock versus you're all in 500 different stocks, right? Now, in the middle, you could have, you could be in 250 individual stocks. But what you're going to find is most people are either going to be like down here, or you're going to be all the way down here. For the most part, being in this range, for the most part, it does not make sense, okay? And we're going to go through each of these categories, right? Now, for, we're talking about 3 to 7 stocks, who should be in that category, in my opinion. 7 to 12 stocks, 12 to 20 stocks. We're talking about 20 to 50 stocks. Who would be in that category? We'll talk about the S&P 500 crowd, and then we'll talk about S&P plus 3, and I'll explain that. That's going to be really, really important. This is definitely a category I think a lot of folks that might be newer to the markets might be into this crowd, and it might make sense, okay? So let me explain this, right? So the 3 to 7 crowd. This is a crowd I was definitely in for the first probably 3, 4, if not 5 years of me being in the stock market. I was in this crowd for a long, long time. And it made sense, okay? So I had a pretty good amount of time I was willing to dedicate toward the stock market, right? I didn't make excuses. Even though I worked like 50 hours a week, I didn't make a bunch of excuses like, I don't have time, blah, blah, blah. I made the time, right? Even in college when I was working like 2, 3 jobs, taking all my credit hours, plus running track for the track team. Even with all that, I always made at least 10 hours, if not 20 hours a week where I could research stocks, I could put in the time, right? But I had small amounts of money, especially initially starting. My first investments were a few $100s. It's, nowadays I have, several stocks I have millions of dollars in, right? But back then, it was like 250 bucks in a stock here, 500 bucks in a stock. It was great if I could, it was like so magical if I could build up a position to like $1,000. That was like so cool, right? And so since I had a smaller amount of money, this made sense for me for a long period of time. And even as I grew the amounts bigger, like, let's say once I hit $100,000, which I hit $100,000 for the first time probably in 2012, 2013, somewhere in there, right? Even then I was still in that crowd of 3 to 7 stocks because for me, even with $100,000, it didn't make sense to own a ton of different stocks because it wasn't like I had built up to a crazy amount, at least in my head, especially at the age I was doing that at. 2012, 2013, what was I, 22, 23 years old, something like that. So it wasn't like I was, way over here, right? Age definitely is a factor. If we want to put up a fourth question, we could talk about age, right? And if you're, 85 years old and you're watching this, which, shout out if you're 85 years old. I doubt anybody's in the smash the thumbs up gang that's 85 years old. But if you were, obviously, you're not trying to take that much risk for the most part, right? I might be trying to take that much risk at 85, but, some people might not, right? So for me, it made sense to be down here. A smaller amount of money. Let's say you got $1,000 to your name. Does it really make sense to diversify it in 20 different stocks? No, and especially if you have a limited amount of time. You want to be in a smaller amount of stocks, especially with a smaller amount of money, so you can focus on those stocks, right? I mean, imagine let's say you got 7 hours a week. 1 hour every single day you put in toward stock research or looking into companies, things like that, right? Definitely doable for 99.9% of the population out there. They can put 1 hour a day into stocks, right? If you got that 1 hour a day towards stocks, you're not talking about a huge amount of time, so it's going to be hard for you to track 25 different stocks, right? 35 different stocks. And so it makes sense for you to be in a smaller amount of stocks, right? Now, on the flip side, if you got a smaller amount of time and you've got $10 million you want to put in stocks, you better be in more than 3 to 7 stocks, right? You're getting too under diversified there, okay? So I would say for most folks that are newer to the markets, have a limited time, let's say less than 10 hours a week, and especially a smaller amount of money, it makes sense for the most part to be here. Or a crowd that's a little bit more of an aggressive investor, which is definitely myself when I was 22, 23 years old, even as I was building up to 6 figures plus in my stock accounts, my stock portfolios, it made sense to be in a smaller amount of stocks, right? Now, once again, we don't go as far as to go all in one stock here or something like that, because the issue is, you go all in one stock. Yeah, if it goes great, it goes great. But a lot of times, even that one stock can be wrong. I've been wrong in the past, over the past 12 plus years. I'll be wrong again in the future. So to put all my eggs in one basket doesn't make sense. I got to have some diversity there, right? Okay. Now let's talk about the 7 to 12 crowd. Now, this is something I moved to probably 2016, 2017, somewhere around there, right? As amounts of money, got bigger and bigger, and we got to, let's say, multi-$100,000. Now we're talking about it's a bigger amount of money. Now I need to move to somewhere in here. Now, I will say I personally feel like this is the perfect amount of stocks for most people that want to individually stock pick. The reason being is most folks don't, once again, have the type of time to dedicate towards stock market investing that they want to own 20, 25, 30 different stocks. It's too much to keep up with, right? So for that reason, I think it's good. Also, I feel like it's a perfect amount of not over diversification, but not under diversification, right? Somebody owning 3 or 4 stocks, let's say, for some folks, that's too much of a risk, right? They're too scared. They're like, what if 2 of these stocks go bad? I'm going to be in real trouble, right? And so that amount, it's too small for a lot of investors out there. That's too aggressive of a number, especially if somebody's built up to, let's say, tens of thousands of dollars in their portfolio or hundreds of thousands of dollars in portfolio. So I have always felt like this number right here, this 7 to 12, is the perfect sweet spot for most investors that want to individually stock pick, okay? 7 to 12 stocks. Now, 12 to 20 stocks. So this is for that crowd that is like getting to like 500,000 plus dollars, okay? This is, 12 to 20 stocks definitely makes sense for a lot of that crowd. Now, most folks watching this video, you're not gonna have a $500,000 plus in your stock market portfolio. So for the most part, you'll be down here, right? Somewhere in here. But once you build up to bigger and bigger amounts of money, and you're talking about you're tacking on time, right? You're going to be in situations where you're going to get into more positions it's natural, right? As amounts of money build up over time and as positions build up. Because sometimes you're going to have positions in your portfolio that you might have bought 3, 4, 5 years ago, but you really don't want to sell out of that, but at the same time you're buying new stocks, right? And so this is kind of the sweet spot for, let's say, a lot of folks that have maybe $500,000 to $2 million, okay? Now, for folks that have more than $2 million, this is also a pretty good spot to be in if you're a very aggressive investor, which I would describe myself as pretty close to being a very aggressive investor, right? I have a lot more than $2 million in stocks, but you'll still usually find me right around roughly 20 stocks total. And the reason being is I'm more of an aggressive investor. So although I have many millions in the market, I'm definitely willing to take that level of risk. Now, for somebody else in my shoes that has that amount of money, they might not feel comfortable in that. So they might have to branch out a little more. But for myself, I'm always going to invest a little more on the aggressive side. Remember, I was still in this category even when I had 6 figures plus in my stock market portfolios, right? So that's some food for thought there. I'm a little more aggressive. And it really comes down to how aggressive of an investor do you want to be, right? How much do you know? How much time? I personally have all the time in the world to dedicate toward the stock market because I've been fortunate to build a life around stock market investing, right? I make YouTube videos around stock market investing. I have my private stock group, which we just talk about stocks all the time in there. And I also make them private videos about, all different stock subjects and teaching those, right? And then other than that, I'm investing for myself in my portfolios. So I'm spending, 50, 60, maybe 70 hours a week on stock market related things. So I have, once again, like I know what I'm doing and I have a lot of time to spend toward this, so I can be a little more aggressive here, okay? But when your accounts get bigger and bigger, it's gonna make sense to kind of go down there. And also, you're gonna hold some stocks sometimes that you might have bought years ago that you don't wanna cash out of and you don't wanna pay that taxes on, right? And you're like looking at it and like, I still believe in the stock. I think they're still gonna grow. I've already got new money to fund some new stock purchase, right? And meanwhile, you don't wanna take that tax hit on a stock there. Sometimes it makes sense just to hold and not get out of it, especially if you still like it for the long term and maybe you feel like it has a lot more upside in future years, right? Now, let's talk about this here, okay? 20 to 50 stocks. When we're starting to talk about 25 stocks, 35 stocks, 45 stocks, things like that, right? Now we're talking, you've got to have, I would call it, tens of millions invested for the most part, and have a ton of time on your hands, right? Like if you look at, for instance, Cathie Wood's portfolio, Warren Buffett's portfolio, a lot of hedge fund manager portfolios, you're gonna find a lot of them have 20 to 50 different positions outstanding, okay? Now of those 20 to 50, there might only be half of those might be meaningful positions. The other ones might be really, really small, not really game changers for those companies. But if you look at Warren Buffett's portfolio, Cathie Wood's portfolio, and just a ton of other famous investors, a lot of them are in that kind of sweet spot of 20 to 50 stocks. Now, the issue I've seen is I've seen a lot of investors who, don't really know what they're doing and have much smaller amounts that are in that 20 to 50 stocks. And that's an issue, right? I see a ton of folks, they think, let's just spread the money around, right? So let's say they have, $30,000 to invest. They just spread it around 35 different stocks. The issue with that is now you're kind of just more gambling, right? Because I highly doubt most people can have the time to track 35 different stocks. Plus, remember, you're always looking into new stocks, right? So if you're talking about like 35 different stocks to track, that's a nightmare for most investors. And if you don't know what you're doing in the markets, especially, and a lot of times when I find, folks that have this many stocks, a lot of times they don't really know what they're doing either. It leads to trouble, okay? The only reason somebody should be with this many individual stocks is if you have, let's say at least 8 figures plus invested in stocks, right? At least an 8-figure plus net worth, and you really have that sort of time to dedicate, okay? I own 20 stocks roughly or so, and I can tell you, I personally have trouble keeping up with them, even with me dedicating all my time towards stock market related things, right? That is some food for thought there. There's a ton of times where some news article will come out about one of my stocks I own, and there's a ton of people in the private group that are already talking about that hours and hours before I even find out about it, okay? This is some food for thought, guys, that just flat out, it's hard to keep, the more stocks you own, the harder it is to track everything that's going on with them, keep up with the news, keep up with the earnings, did they miss, did they hit, is everything still on the trajectory that when I started investing in a stock, is it still all playing out the way I thought it was, or is it even better than that, or is it actually far worse, okay? So this is some food for thought around this one. Now, in terms of this one, the S&P 500 crowd, this is the simplest one of the bunch. Like literally, if you don't want to do this, right, which is once again probably only 1% of the people watching this video. I think almost everybody that's watching this video, you want to be a stock picker, right? You want to build your portfolio through individual stocks. But for that 1% that just doesn't want to do it and is watching this video, S&P 500 index fund, it's your next best thing. Hopefully you can get your like 8% per year, and it's all good, okay? That's S&P 500. Now this last one, S&P plus 3. I think this makes the most sense for people that already have, let's say people that already have 20,000 plus in stocks, okay? So let's say 20K plus, and are still definitely in major learning phase, okay? Now, you're always learning in the stock market, right? Even me personally, I'm still learning to this day, and every year I feel like I get better. Every 5 years especially, I feel like I get better. Like me today as an investor, far better than I was 5 years ago. And the 5 years ago me was far better than the 5 years before that, Jeremy, right? And so you're always going to be learning, but we're talking about this is initial phase, okay? You're talking, you really got a lot to learn, and you've got over $20,000. So what makes sense a lot of times is put the majority of the money in an S&P 500 index fund while you're doing your look into these companies, trying to figure out all these things you got to look for, right? And something like my private stock group that can obviously help your knowledge get built up there way faster so you're ready to rock and roll, right? But for a lot of folks that maybe aren't going that route, you got a lot to learn, right? For me, it took probably 2 years before I really starting to feel comfortable investing. Year 3 was when it really started to click and everything started to hit, and I really started identifying real opportunities in the market and started getting some really big gainers. The first 2 years, it was like, some losses here and there. It was some stocks that were just very okay-ish that now I look back and I'm like, why was I investing in that stock? Like that was trash, right? Year 3, things really started to click, especially if you're learning on your own. It's tough, man. It's really, really, really tough. I wish I had programs like, what I went through back in the day. There was really nothing like that. All there was back then was like a lot of day trading stuff, like day trading, send you like day trading DVDs in the mail or books and things like that. And books are pretty good to learn, but we have it easier nowadays. Let's just put it that way. Never mind commissions. Oh man, when I started in 1995 per trade, nowadays free per trade, okay? But if you're really learning and you got 20,000 plus, S&P 500 plus own 3 stocks. This means you got the majority of your money over in the S&P 500, and as you get more and more comfortable with individual stock picking, as you get more and more confidence in yourself and like prove it out, like, hey, I can actually do this, right? Because there's that time period when you're getting in the market where you're like, can I really do this? Am I just getting tricked here? Is there something here, right? And I went through that same phase my first year or two as well. I was like, I didn't start out and I wasn't like, oh man, I'm gonna be so good at this, I'm gonna get these crazy returns. No way. In my first couple of years, I was like, dabbling and trying to figure out, is this really gonna be something that's sustainable, right? And then year 3, things started to click, and then I started to prove myself more and more. And if you're kind of newer to the market, S&P 500 plus own 3 stocks. As you get more comfortable, you can sell out of the S&P 500 index fund, go more and more into individual stocks as you feel comfortable. Do things on your own time frame, right? Don't feel rushed into things. If you're not ready to make that leap and invest more and more into individual stocks, then don't make that leap. Like, go when you're ready, okay? Go when you're ready. Everybody's ready at different phases. Some people are 3 months in, 6 months in, and they're already, their knowledge is crazy, right? And other folks, it takes them several years to really get that confidence and get that knowledge about what I'm doing, and that confidence that, hey, I know what I'm doing. I know how to pick these stocks. I know what a good value is for a stock and things like that, guys. It takes some time there. Run your own race. Don't focus on other people and what they're doing or what they were at. Just because I did things a certain way doesn't mean absolutely you have to do it that way, okay? This is what I've seen from myself and from a ton of other people and what makes the most sense. However, go at your own pace. Just because somebody else might get it at this stage, if you don't get it at that stage, run your own race. Make sure you know what you're doing out there, guys. So yeah, hope you enjoyed this big whiteboard video here, how many stocks one should hold. That's my opinion on this. And yeah, hope you guys enjoy this as always. Like I said, all I ask in return is that you smash that like button. And that's literally it, guys. By the way, just launched a brand new thing, which is essentially an ability to text me. And I'm gonna try to get back to at least 5 questions per day. If you have any stock market related questions you'd like to ask me, go ahead and text the number. That will be pinned comment down there. I repeat, the pinned comment down there should also be the #1 link in the description. I'll try my best to get back to folks. No promises, okay, but I'll try my best. And other than that, if you're looking to join my private stock group, the private Discord chat, and learn at a much higher level and kind of speed things up for your process and whatnot, check out the second pinned comment down there. It'll also be the second link as the in the description area. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.